I've often talked of the devastating poverty and inequality in the UK. I'm really concerned about this. And I don't think that as a society we should be resting easy when any person doesn't have a certain level of basics such as housing, food, and health. However, the World Bank has published a new report saying that the outlook for the world's most vulnerable economies is bleak, that a historical reversal in development is underway. The World Bank classifies 75 countries that have International Development Association status. This gives them access to low interest loans and grants. Just under a quarter of the world's population live in these countries, yet they account for 70% of extreme poverty. What do we mean by extreme poverty? This is people living on less than $2.15 per person per day. There are 500 million people living below this extreme poverty line. The World Bank concludes that for these people, the outlook is bleak. It finds that for these poorer countries, development improvements have started to reverse. 1 in 3 of these countries is poorer now than prior to the pandemic. And over the past 5 years, half of the countries have seen their per capita income differentials relative to advanced economies widen. I don't know about you, but for me, these levels of extreme poverty are totally unacceptable. How can I sit here in comfort knowing that 500 million people are suffering around the globe? If you ask an economist about global poverty, most of them will say that it's dramatically decreased over the past 30 years. Most of them will attribute this to free market and free trade policies. They'll show you charts like this, the percentage of the population in extreme poverty for various groupings of countries. EMDEs are emerging markets and developing economies. Extreme poverty has been falling dramatically. Victory to global free markets. Looking at the orange line, which represents the world, apart from these 75 vulnerable countries, we can see that there is now only a small percentage of the population globally which is in extreme poverty, and it's predicted to get smaller by 2030. And even for the 75 most vulnerable countries, the proportion has fallen dramatically. However, it's clear that there are still very significant numbers of people suffering extreme poverty. 500 million people, more than 7 times the population of the UK. Of course, we can also point out that we're only talking about extreme poverty here, less than $2.15 a day. However, as I've documented in a few videos on the channel, poverty and inequality are rife in the UK and globally. We have people in the UK experiencing destitution. This is the result of neoliberal economic policies, and it is a global trend. The rich getting rich and the poor getting poorer. But here in this video, we're talking about the very poorest people in the world. This level of poverty just should not exist in a civilized world. One of the indicators of the change in the past 5 years is shown in this graph. How food insecurity is increasing significantly in these 75 countries. Bear in mind, the World Bank is one of the world's neoliberal institutions. This really emphasises the seriousness of this issue, because the World Bank economists would typically be of the kind that point out how free trade and free markets have dramatically reduced global poverty. The FT, which isn't exactly a bastion of left-wing thinking, has also highlighted the crisis. In an opinion piece this week, the excellent Martin Wolf said that it's essential, morally right and clearly affordable to increase funding to these countries. He says that not doing so would be truly unaffordable. We can't afford to sit back and let people suffer like that while we live in comfort. It's interesting the point that we can't afford not to eradicate this poverty. This isn't only from a moral perspective. When such disparities exist globally, there is a massive incentive for economic migrants to try and seek a better life in richer countries. Economic migrants are talked about with such disdain, as if they have such nerve in trying to come to our wealthy countries to have a better life for them and their families. Personally, I would be much more welcoming to migrants. However, in addition, the more that we actually help the poorest in the world to have better lives, the less incentive there'll be for them to try to migrate to countries where they have better prospects. Oxfam International has published some data for International Workers' Day on the 1st of May. They pointed out that global dividend payouts to shareholders have increased 14 times faster than worker pay since 2020. Global dividend payouts increased 45% over this period, while workers' real wages increased by 3%. Taking China out of the picture actually shows that real wages fell 3% during this period. At a very practical level, this is one of the reasons why the global poverty gap between rich and poor is increasing. I like this final sentence of the quote from Oxfam. The super rich don't amass their mega fortunes by working, they extract it from people who do. I am left-wing, but I do believe that people that work hard should profit from it. I don't have any problem in people getting rich. However, this kind of disparity, this kind of economic power imbalance, I don't know how this can exist in a decent, civilized world. For me, there's something really problematic in a system that rewards shareholders so much at the expense of workers, the people who are actually producing the value that gives the shares their value. I'm an ambitious idealist. I want to end all poverty. I want every person in the world to have easy access to a basic level of housing, health, food. This is an ambitious target, and it would require massive changes to the global economic system. However, it is achievable to do something about extreme poverty now. As the FT says, it is clearly affordable to increase funding to these countries substantially. So why aren't we doing it? I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd be really grateful for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.